Hello, viewers, and welcome to Games by Design. As always, I am Deus.
I am Rage.
I am Pseudo.
Today we have a topic that is very, very close to all of our hearts: the monetization and its impact on new game design. This is something that is horrible that has been happening to our wonderful games that we all love. And I know Pseudo has been chomping at the bit to dig into this topic, and he's got some interesting points to start with, so I'm going to let him dig in first.
All right. I'll propose some topics, and I guess we'll just kind of choose among us which one we want to talk about first.
Yeah, see what the chat wants to talk about too.
First off, I guess we should probably define what a microtransaction is, which I'll get to in a second. But first, we'll actually choose what kind of topic we want to do. Um, One of the ones I have would be what really is this, and what does this mean for AAA games? Um, do microtransactions need regulations, or should we just let them go on their own? And then if they do need regulations, what should we do and what can the individual consumer do to kind of, you know, affect or counteract what they feel like is going to be best practices going forward? So with that said, I guess a quick definition of what a microtransaction is. Typically what they'll be is when you have a game, the game will come with certain features or content in the game on launch, which then can be unlocked further with money, or you can buy in-game currency to then unlock said things. So typically, the difference between this and like downloadable content or DLC is that DLC is usually typically made after a game has initially launched as additional content, and then you pay money to acquire it, just as if you're buying a new product. Whereas microtransactions are typically the game has been fully made, it's released, but now there's stuff that's locked behind walls that you have to pay to acquire or to use, such as that.
Also known as paywalled content.
Yeah. So, yeah, what topic or how do you want to start?
I'd say let's talk a little bit about like how it has impacted the actual design of video games as they've been sort of integrated into single and multiplayer games, and how that paywall can affect the actual implementation of game features.
I think the best way to exemplify that is to really let's start at the beginning. As Sudo was telling us what we thought was super interesting. The very first AAA game to have a pay feature like this.
Yeah. It was the from my understanding at least, I could also be wrong about this because internet history is always hard. Was Oblivion with their horse armor, and it's borderline what could be DLC, but I believe that from what I remember, it released along other DLC, and this was additional stuff that you can unlock, but was still in the game alongside with the other content that they released.
So it was in the game, but you had to pay to get it.
Yeah, I believe they released it as a part of the other part of the DLC because they released it all at once. So like the actual like expansion as was what they were, and then as a part of the expansion, they're like, oh, you can pay $2.50 and get this single piece of horse armor with some storage on it. But it was already still kind of, it was like the borderline between microtransaction and DLC, but it was really kind of like the birth of DLC where it could have just been included with everything else and not have been a smaller additional fee, such as a microtransaction.
Yeah, it was already packaged into the files that you had downloaded. It was just something that you then had to give them more money to unlock, despite the fact that it was already made.
So there's the first one on our list. No, Team Fortress 2 was one of the first, if not the first. But Team Fortress 2 was also free.
It wasn't free for
Wasn't
a
it?
while.
Oh,
When you had
okay,
that.
it started as a
Eventually
cost.
became free.
Did the
Yeah,
cosmetic microtransactions come before it went free or after?
yeah, way before. Luckily enough, I've actually played a lot of Team Fortress 2. It was one of the main games I played
Yeah, I remember.
growing up, and it's one of those things where that's why I kind of been like baptized by fire with this kind of industry practice, and I've seen it for a long time. But at least with like Team Fortress 2, it was, as you said, it was just cosmetic, and I'm a little less salty about that because I did make quite a bit of money on an unusual hat.
Yeah,
made your money back, so it's
and
fine,
they actually had a
right?
marketplace where you could sell them and earn them, and Hey,
Yeah,
Nariel, great to see you again. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Oh yeah, EA is
Don't
definitely
worry, we'll
going on
get
the
there.
shit list,
The shit
Langston.
list is going to
Don't you
build
worry
as
about
we keep
this.
talking.
Uh, but the interesting thing with games that have tried to use the oh, but it's only cosmetic thing as a defense for microtransactions, there are some that do it in a way that I feel is less egregious. Like Dota 2, for instance. Uh, Dota Dota 2, all of the champions are free. You can play anybody you want, but you can also choose to pay more money for a skin or for a different look or for, uh, for your wards to look different, stuff like that. I think that's somewhat less egregious because it is a free to play game by design and it has been
Well,
from launch.
it's not free to you pay for the game itself, but you get access to all of the core game content.
No, you don't
Nope.
pay for Dota
Dota
2.
2?
Dota 2 is
Dota 2
free.
is free. Same with League of Legends. It's the
Okay.
same model.
I did not realize
It
that.
is not actually the same
Different
model.
model.
League of Legends, you do have to pay for character unlocks.
You don't have to technically, but I do get they're not all just free at once. But I meant was you still pay for just the cosmetic stuff. You don't always just pay for. I mean, besides just champions and like EXP boosts, which don't really count too much. I mean, like the whole free to play. We're gonna push out a bunch of skins, and then these skins are gonna be like the main focus of our monetization.
I want to come back to that point about EXP boosts, but yes, it is very much that the core game itself is free, and then you're buying add-ons to that, which I think makes it somewhat less egregious. It does lower barrier to entry, especially with the fact that you can unlock champions in League of Legends with in-game currency. It just takes a lot longer.
Yeah, I don't like their tendency to make sure that the newest champions are always powerful. Something that everybody's going to want. I get it, but it's not just an addition. It's a hey, let's try to sell something.
Yeah, and it's a an interesting thing because it's one of the ways that you can really see DLC or microtransactions influencing or the monetization thereof influencing how they're designed. Like, I'm not saying that League of Legends intentionally makes new characters, uh, but or intentionally makes new characters overpowered, but it sure feels that way. Like it, the new characters always seem to be very, very strong when they're initially released.
Okay, to get to Langston's point, DLC isn't a bad thing at its core if it's done right. DLC should be an expansion onto a complete game. DLC is just what we used to call expansions in the day, like Mortal Kombat 11. I didn't play enough of it. I think Rage might know a bit more about it.
I am actually not very familiar with the Mortal Kombat games, but I am somewhat familiar with their monetization model. Payday 2, I did play a heck of a lot of. I love that game. And I think that its DLC is actually done very well. The DLC that you buy is a new character, some new maps, some new guns, and generally they're worth the money. Like
That
you can
sounds like an
tell that
expansion.
you play this new map and it's got new mechanics in it. It's got new areas. It's got new models. It's got new this, that, and the other thing. And as somebody who owns almost all of the Payday 2 DLC, I've had enough fun with all of them that I think considered it worth it. However, there is a there is a there is a tendency for a lot of games to push out very low effort content and still charge for it. Like horse armor, for instance. Not a whole lot of effort has to go into modeling and painting some horse armor. It's just an artist for a couple of weeks.
The Horizon Zero Dawn DLC is a fantastic piece of DLC. Fantastic piece. That is how DLC should be done. If I had to choose pieces of DLC to model after, the top two would be Horizon Zero Dawn and Bloodborne.
Yeah.
That is good.
And
That is good quality amounts of content in your DLC for about a $30 price tag. You're getting almost half another game.
And again, I would say that goes back more to the the expansion model more than DLC. Whereas Payday 2 is very much DLC. It is. You know, Langston, I never did play the Mass Effect series. I have never played those ones.
Mass Effect was shit for DLC. It was EA at core.
Ah,
Their DLCs were like, have another gun in the game. You'll start with it.
$5, please.
Yeah, pretty much. And that was mostly in Mass Effect 2 is when all that started. Mass Effect 1 didn't have a ton of it. It was kind of predating a lot of that going mainstream. Mass Effect 2, you can see the change in their design to sell these things. Mass Effect 1, hundreds of guns with levels and stats and super interesting to gear and itemize everyone. Mass Effect 2, you get one other gun of every kind. Any more?
Yeah,
you gotta pay for.
That's pretty egregious. Reminds me of the change in game design between Dead Space 2, which I thought was actually fantastic. I love that game. And Dead Space 3, which now introduced microtransactions in order to buy in-game resources in a single player game. Like, they clearly made it much more grindy to be able to upgrade your weapons in Dead Space 3 in order to encourage you to pay for these resource bundles so that you could have a max upgraded gun by point X in the game.
This is a single player game.
Yes, single player game.
One story, follow it through. But no, if you want the story to be enjoyable and well paced, give us extra money.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you've got to
particularly
do grindy
egregious.
side quests.
Not fun.
Yeah, this is not good game content. This is not how you design a good game. Now, if they wanted to make a good game and make it longer, make that grindy side content interesting. You can still keep it somewhat
I'm
grindy.
a bad person to speak about that with. Anytime I find like the grindy little fetch side quests, I'm just like, nope. I guess I'm going back to the story. The Stora.
By the alpha, we don't do that.
Yeah, pre-ordering games is not something that we do.
It's not so much a pre-order though. You get it's like that early access model, but I mean it's like $20 right now.
It's pre-ordering.
Yeah, it's
You're
still
pre-ordering an unfinished product.
Hey, we're thinking of finishing this game and we want to sell it. Do you want to pay us before it's done so we know that we've sold it and don't have to try so hard?
Yeah, but for some models, I mean it still works. Like the Session and Skater XL for like less than $20, just kind of fund the indie studios for the titles. Like I kind of agree.
I admit there are some indie studios where I see that they're doing something cool. I'm like, hey, I really like that. I love this idea. It looks really exciting, and it's not super expensive, and I'm willing to put the money in knowing it's an indie studio, the game may never get done, the game may never come out, but I like what they're doing, so I want to put my money into it. But I don't think of it as buying a game. I think of it as a Kickstarter for a game.
Yeah, you're throwing some money at them and hoping eventually you get a game.
Yeah.
And that's it's a pattern that killed Dead Cells, in my opinion. There was a lot of hype around Dead Cells when the early access first started, but because it's a roguelite, it's it's just like, okay, you play it a bunch of times and then you're done. You're just kind of done with the game. Sure, they're releasing more items and stuff, but why would you go back once you've got your fill out of it?
Yeah. The crux of this is people are trying to monetize single player games like they monetize multiplayer games.
And some of that
just
multiplayer monetization is pretty egregious.
It is.
Like well, I can't speak to the new Call of Duty because I haven't looked into its microtransaction model, but I'm betting there is one. I'll speak to some of the older Call of Duty games and a particularly egregious one, Battlefront 2, which was a $60 purchase upfront, and then included tons of microtransactions for customization and also gambling in order to buy power. You literally got stronger by spending money in a competitive, well, somewhat competitive multiplayer shooter.
Okay, I want to touch on the Assassin's Creed one because that's going to segue into adding another one onto my developer shit list for other reasons as well. Just for purely toxic behavior. Yes, Ubisoft is on the shit list. 100%. So, as we were talking about the monetizing in the single player games, what they've done in the latest iteration of Assassin's Creed in order to sell loot crates and bonus XP and stuff like that, they've level locked your main story quest. So you can only do the story quest when you've reached the level that they say you have to be on to do it. They've drawn out the leveling process to make it a long, grindy grind for every level, and doing just the main story quests will get you maybe halfway to the level you need to be at. You have to do all the grindy side content in order to continue the main story at this point, or buy their XP bonus.
And of course, we're all busy people. We're adults. We have jobs, and those of us who aren't adults and don't have jobs probably have parents that do. If you're playing video games anyway, and there's this convenient small just little micro purchase, a micro transaction, if you will, that you can make to suddenly make this grind go away.
You already paid them for the game. You gave them the money for their work. Now they're trying to charge you for your own time. Literally. They're trying to make you pay for your own time. That is not even the worst. I hated Ubisoft and have not put a penny into that company for a long time, ever since I heard this story. Okay, so when you buy a game, the key price is based on region. Games sell for different prices in different places. So there was a gray market that was buying cheap games and selling them in expensive markets through legitimate stores. The people that purchased and registered these games went to a legitimate licensed store online, purchased the key legally, received their purchase, got their receipt and everything, and then after a little while Bethesda went, "Oh hey, these keys shouldn't be in the
Ubisoft, not Bethesda.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just so used to bitching about Bethesda. But Ubisoft saw that these keys were meant for a cheaper market and registered in an expensive market and didn't like this idea. So instead of going after the people who committed the gray market sale and trying to recoup the money from the people that scammed them out a few bucks, they just revoked all the games from the players' libraries on their store. All the people who bought legal games woke up one day and went, "Oh hey, I don't have a game anymore."
It's just gone.
And there was no legal recourse they could do. They could just basically go back to Ubisoft and go, "Hey, can I please have my game back?" And they were like, "Yeah, just buy it. We'll give it back to you."
Yep. Go buy it twice.
That's Ubisoft. That's their take on the market. They do not give an inkling of a shit about their audience at all. At all. They're nothing but a number and a dollar to them. If they can screw you, they will. Yeah, don't give them any more money. Don't buy their games.
Stop giving Ubisoft money. Straight up. Don't do it.
This is how we make them
Plus,
pay.
there's this whole like creeping culture of pre-ordering and deluxe editions and super deluxe editions and adding on more and more and more shit that could just be in the base game and then charging twice as much as the base game. And then you get people going, well, how do I make sure that I have this whole game? How do I make sure that I have access to all of the content in this game that I really want to play? And they're buying these $120 versions of these games that are essentially the base game plus some skins plus a promise that eventually there's going to be some DLC that'll be worth it.
Yeah, buy the game now, and someday the DLC will fix it.
It's so frustrating.
That really segues into the Fallout 76 issue, which is the direction of pre-ordering. This is the evolution of pre-ordering. Pseudo, I'm pretty sure you followed that shenanigan as well, right?
Oh yeah.
Do you remember what? Did you ever see Bethesda's press release on that one?
Yeah. This.
There's
been a lot of Bethesda shows. There's been so many that they all just blur together now, and the amount of times I've seen Todd Howard be like, "I'm sorry," it's just like, God, so just stop.
I don't believe you. I do not believe that you are sorry. I don't believe that this is a thing. Oh, and the best part is this game will not have paid content, and then they start selling private servers that it turns out aren't actually private. They're just recycled public servers. And
Hello,
they sell
I'm Tony Hayward,
this new
President
convenience method because we couldn't let you carry around all this scrap unless you paid us more money, and it just takes your scrap and deletes it. It's just gone.
CEO of BP. Our accidental drilling spill again in the Gulf is a tragedy that
you don't think it can get worse, and then they just somehow just managed to make it. It's like, wow. Let's get this thing you pay a lot of money for, like basically a Netflix subscription for a single game, and then have it just start deleting your stuff.
And it actively makes your gaming experience worse, which is my favorite part.
But not the press release I was talking about, but there was a press release that talks about a trend. And when we talk about if we ignore these game companies and we let them keep doing what they want to do, this trend is going to continue. And the trend is now visible. Thank you, Bethesda. Their product they knew was buggy. They knew Fallout 76 was buggy as shit from the beginning. And they released a press conference saying they would not be releasing the game to any reviewers because negative reviews of Fallout 4 had affected their sales. Instead, what they said is, okay, we're not going to let you review this game because it's multiplayer and we don't want anyone to get a leg up in the multiplayer environment. Was their reasoning for not letting anybody see this? Then everybody pre-ordered the game, and they made tons and tons and tons of money on a buggy piece of shit, and they went, look, it worked. So they released another press statement saying that because the release of Fallout 76 was so successful, they are going to continue with this release strategy. Namely, we're not going to let people review our games, we're just going to pre-sell them and hope you buy them.
You don't get to find out whether or not it's good or not. You just have to give us $60. No, wait, actually, that's not quite enough. If you want all the content, you have to give us $120.
No Man's Sky. When we first saw No Man's Sky, Rage, Pseudo, and myself all went, no, they're not.
Yep.
Yeah,
There's no way that they could release the game that they wanted to. There was no way. But apparently now it's actually really good. So
yeah, it's like top 10 anime resurrections. It's making those lists. I have the latest version of it now because it went on. It's like a super sale, and it is now what they were saying it was going to be on launch. But it was so obvious he was so full of shit when he was originally talking. I mean, like, oh yeah, there's multiplayer, but the chances of you running into another player is like 1 in a million. It's like, you know how much effort and code it is to like
multiplayer then?
No, but it's like, you know how much effort? You know how much effort it would take to make a game multiplayer to then not, use it? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you have an entire like client server architecture for the 1 in a million chance. I'm like, why? Like, you're so obviously like just bullshitting.
Here's the thing. Here's why we knew it was going to be this way before it ever came out. What they wanted to do was a lot of work, and their studio is not very big, and they did not have very much money. So either they've come up with a revolutionary new way to make video games, or they're full of shit.
and revolutionary new way to make video games would be really nice.
Yeah,
I
that
would
would've
love
been
to see
awesome.
massive games that are like full of content and stuff. But for a small indie studio with not a ton of funding, not very likely.
So
And Langston, from what I've heard, No Man's Sky definitely is worth a reinstall. From what I've heard, it has gotten much, 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 much better.
It actually has multiplayer and
so
like VR support and stuff now too. They've added quite a bit to it. They actually like
so we've
it's a good example of like taking a bad situation and not just giving up. If they actually, I mean, they made a lot of money, so they had the resources to actually like make what they wanted to make after, but they could have just ran with it.
we
It just
bitched about.
wasn't that on release.
Well, Untitled Goose Game is actually a legitimately good game. Well designed, interesting interactions. I've seen quite a few play of it, and it is not just a meme game. It's a legit game.
I
Yeah,
have it and I love it.
it
And I
is.
absolutely love that game.
It is a very focused game. It is a very simple game, but it's a good
Honk.
game. There's nothing wrong with it.
But what I've
Uh,
been saying is we've been shitting on these and talking about how bad they are. Let's touch on how they got bad, at what made them bad, and actually take a look at this moving trend. Because what that's going to show you is if we don't start paying attention to what these game companies are doing and not letting them do it, it's going to get worse and it's going to continue. One example is the Bethesda example.
Just continue to be rewarded for making you pre-order and buy microtransactions to get game content. So, Bethesda, in particular, is one of the bigger offenders. In as such as you will often see Bethesda's games wrapped up in a nice little digital download or a disc with content that is behind a paywall already in there. It's already there. It's already done. There's no reason this could not be in the base game. Any day one DLC could have been in the base game. And these just arbitrarily cut out pieces of work are sold to you at an additional cost. This is also done is in the pre-order culture by saying, "Oh, here's your base game. You can have it for $60." But if you want to have, the full experience, you've got to give us $120, and we will in turn give you some skins, and then you can also have a promise that eventually there will be some DLC.
Valve is an interesting argument on it because it is microtransaction, but they also let you collect and sell them.
That's I don't know if that's always a good thing though. I have a bunch of topics and a bunch of discussion points on that and how Valve kind of turned a blind eye to some really sketchy stuff for quite a long time, and it wasn't until it caught media attention until they shut down all those websites that were like it's not so much that, but the economy that grew and the trading and the kind of the marketplace
Mm-hmm.
started the whole gambling, online gambling asset for like betting on CS:GO games with skins and stuff like that. And there's no age regulation for that. They made so much money because they take a cut off all sales. When you sell to another player in the game, they get a little cut. So they made like an insane amount of money off that and all that like gambling.
Yeah, but that wasn't necessarily them promoting the gambling. That was
But they
gambling
put
rising out of their architecture still, right?
yeah, but they put the tools in place and they turned a blind eye to it until the media caught attention, and
I'm
then like within a weeks they turned it off. So like they had the ability to do it the whole time, but they're like, this is a nice cash cow. We're gonna wait until someone we get kind of caught up in this. We're like it's an ethical thing, right? Where
yes.
they're not really sorry. They're just waiting until someone says, hey, that's bad, and they're like, oops, we didn't know. We didn't know children would be gambling with this.
And at that point, they didn't really get in any trouble, did they? No, no,
No,
no real
like
slaps on the
they do.
wrist. So I
Yeah,
would say
like
that is the very, very beginning of the actual online game gambling.
well, it was the whole like the loot crate stuff started with them, right?
Yeah.
You would in
Yep,
TF2 for the
CS:GO
unusual
and
hat.
TF2.
I'm one of the rare few people who ended up with like a $600 hat, and that's what everyone wanted, right? You wanted to open this stuff, and you have a chance. You spend $2.50, and you can make $600.
Yeah, so it's they. I would say that they definitely belong on the shit list as well.
100%.
Plus, they haven't made a game in like well over a decade.
But they also resurrected
Uh,
PC
they've,
gaming at one
they've,
point.
they've they've made games. They've just made really shitty games. They made their card game Artifact.
Did they actually develop that, or was that farmed out? Because I know they farmed out most of Dota 2.
When did TF2 die, Langston?
I don't know if it's exactly farmed out, but I mean, like most of the bigger corporations is what they do. Like that's what EA does with all their games. So if we're gonna call EA on the shit list, then we're gonna have to kind of hold them to the same.
No. I'm just saying that Valve hasn't actually made a game in that
Yeah,
long.
well,
Like,
they're listed as
company Valve
the
has not
primary
developed.
developer and publisher of that. So I'm assuming they are.
I don't.
Maybe.
You play a few sports games actually, Pseudo Rage. You don't play many. I've just put
No,
EA on
hardly
the
at all.
list, and I was shocked and amazed when I found out how much content of the NHL games are behind paywalls now.
Yep. Check out 2K basketball.
Oh dear God.
NBA 2K19. It
Yeah,
is a gambling game with some basketball attached.
even just even just the online creative player is just like they kind of put the RPG aspects into it, where you start off as just like a really terrible player and you grind up and you
Yep.
unlock and you kind of get better. But like it is impossible without paying to get anywhere. And then all you see and all you play with is just like all these like super decked out players who just paid $500 in day one, so they don't have to deal with this like 6 months of grinding.
Yep, that's not only affecting the gameplay experience now. So we're seeing this trend of trying to make more money now, affecting our gameplay experience. It's affecting the enjoyment of the games. But morally here, how old do you guys all think the average player of an NHL or NBA game is online?
I'd say 16 to 25.
So there is a
Yeah.
16 to 18 group that is fairly strongly represented.
I'd say FIFA is probably a better example because in Europe that age group is probably more 10 to 25. There's a lot more younger people who play FIFA, and there's a lot of articles that talk about how it has the same business model and the same kind
Yeah,
of like,
it's the same developers.
yeah, like with the pick'ems teams where you like get cards and you can build an online team, and then they have that stuff. And a lot of kids are spending a lot of money on loot crates to try to unlock their favorite players.
Yeah, so now we literally have a casino targeted at people 10 to 18.
People who do not know how casinos work. People who cannot control themselves in casinos. And this is something that we have seen very relevant in mobile game design as well. Like, a lot of the time it comes down to like, hey, your mobile game is now a slot machine. You want to just keep throwing money in here and hoping you get something good, and it's preying on people who don't, for whatever reason, have the force of will to say no, I do not.
And there are some serious, serious victims in this market. Pseudo had some super interesting numbers on what's actually being spent. We can't say where the information comes from, but we do have actual inside market info on some of these, and I'll let him tell you a couple of the horror stories that happen with these micro online transaction games that are free to play and pay to win.
Sure. So, I'll try to find some of the stats that have been published from these people, but this will kind of use this to kind of segue into the kind of what's going to happen to the AAA industry and if we need regulations or not, and kind of just like how there's not going to be too much the average consumer can do to affect this due to just the nature of what's happening. But in the mobile game industry, it is pretty typical that they are designing their games and they are focusing on something that people typically call whales, which are the like 2 to 10% of players that will spend more than everyone else almost combined. And it's kind of the same, make all their money off the 2 to 10% of the people who actually buy the products, because those are the people who are addicted and they spend basically everything they have on it. So with some of these games designed, like I said, like a casino, people like are certain things in the game behind unlocks and stuff like that. They are not uncommon for people to spend upwards of 250,000 and more on a single game, and it's even more common in the like 50,000 range to 100,000 range for
And
people to actually be spending.
these are not huge, expansive games that take a ton of money to develop. They're basically just online casinos.
Yeah, they will typically have a license, like a popular license from somewhere, and then they have just a microtransaction model, and they have a decent game loop where it's addicting enough to actually play the game, and then they slot in the casino aspects into it as kind of like you need to unlock this stuff, and they know that certain people will want certain things just because they on a personal level like certain licensed characters, and they'll just kind of hold the carrot in front of them saying like spend your money, you might get the stuff you want eventually. And then there's also the games that are competitive and you verse other players online, and they'll typically pair you up in a situation where you're going to lose, so you have to spend more money so you feel like you're winning and you want to always kind of be on top. And these people, since it's on their phone, they also get the push notifications, and they also know the perfect time to trigger a push notification if they haven't played in X amount of time, saying, "Hey, we gave you a free box. Unlock it now." They opened one box, they didn't get much, but they got the thrill from the one, and then next thing you know, they bought 5 or 10 or 50.
They have psychologists working with these games to help them figure out the optimal times to create these editions.
Yeah, and then my main concern with this stuff is, of course, this is terribly unethical. These people are going into serious amounts of debt. These aren't just people who just have a lot of money to spend. There's a lot of people who are maxing out credit cards and then don't know what to do. And this is like it's terrible. And the other part of this is for the basic consumer. Whenever EA pulls this stuff, you always see the posts being like, "Don't buy the games, don't pre-order, don't do this." And like we're getting to the point where that doesn't matter because like thousands of us can boycott it, but if one person spends as much money as thousands of us would, then it doesn't matter because they can keep doing that to just that one person.
Yep, and it's something that is not even like hidden or obfuscated if you're relatively familiar with the industry. And I am going to name names here because I feel like this company and person need to be something that the industry is aware of. But the CEO of a company called Tribe Flame, Tora Furenstrom, gave a talk several years ago specifically relating to mobile game design, and it was all about different ways that you can encourage people to stop engaging their analytical part of their brain and start engaging the emotional quick response part of their brain. You show them your in-game currency, your paid currency, which has no real world value, but suddenly it's got a sale on it. You put a little sale tag on it. It doesn't even have to be a good sale. Just say, "Oh, for the next 2 hours, you 10% off bear asses. Buy 10,000 bear asses and get bonus 1,000 bear asses." And this is enough to make people go, "Oh, if I don't jump on this sale right now, I won't get those bonus 10,000 bear asses." And it's something that can encourage impulse spending on things that you don't need, and it's something that is very problematic with people who have at-risk personalities who, for whatever reason, cannot say no, be it gambling addiction, be it just inexperience with the world, be it any sort of reason why they couldn't say
Being
no to
young.
that. Being young, exactly.
There's a reason
And
there's a different criminal stature for juveniles than for adults. Your brain
yeah,
isn't fully developed as a kid. You can't really control a lot of those impulse controls.
you make bad decisions, and there's also this trend of sharing when you buy something. Hey, say you bought your 100th bare ass crate of the day, and when you get your reward from that crate, you finally get that legendary, they give you the option to brag. And this creates a culture of you showing off that you've paid money. You've got this cool thing and you paid money to get it. And now you're creating this peer pressure that is applied to everybody else on your friends list who also plays this game. And they go, "Oh, hey, Rage got that really cool item that I wanted and he only had to, pay microtransaction money. He didn't have to pay a lot of money for that." What they don't know is that I just spent, $100 or whatever on 10,000 bear asses in order to get that bear ass crate. And it's a very toxic culture that encourages people who are impressionable to spend money on things that they do not need to spend money to. And like Pseudo said, it encourages them to go deep into debt. And like, I don't care how much money you're making. If you spend $250,000 on any video game, you spent too much money on a video game.
You could make the game for that much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
for
could have
those
paid
games,
someone
absolutely.
to make you that game with everything free in it for almost that much, like with that much money.
And a lot of this addiction, thinking back, our first touching on the loot crate points, because it brought up an interesting memory for me while you were talking about it. While we were playing Destiny 2 together, and we were opening those free crates that we were getting every once in a while for just playing the game that we would find. And you got an epic ship. And you looked damn fancy when we were loading into different planets. And I was wholly tempted to buy a few crates and try to get myself a fancy ship.
Yeah,
I wasn't dumb
the
enough to do
psychology
it.
works.
I wasn't dumb enough to do it. But they almost beat me out some money.
So to touch on another thing I wanted to bring up with loot boxes and loot crates and the kind of the addiction and getting these people into this, there was an article that was released not too long ago. I haven't had time to fully kind of like fact check everything, but it seems on the up and up, and there's other people who brought this up, is that some streamers have been saying that they've been approached or they've been involved with certain companies and games that pay them to do unboxing, because it's a very common thing for streamers. You watch CS:GO or whatever, they'll buy like, because they have the money, they'll buy like 50 or 100 crates and they'll unlock them on stream because it's just a fun interactive thing to do with the crowd apparently. But some companies will pay streamers for promotional content to do this, and then they will increase the likelihood of getting rare items for the boxes they provide them. So they falsify the drop rate and then publicly, show this off. So then now you have someone who's playing a slot machine in front of a bunch of people and wins a lot, and then you're like, wow, look at that, he's getting this stuff off 50 crates. You go buy 50 crates, you get maybe one thing. You're like, okay, well, I wanted all this other stuff, and it's such a shady practice. It's so sketchy.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's
Because they're not even giving you an accurate representation of what the loot looks like.
yeah, and it's
We
just
will never do that. Just letting you know. If we ever get anything for free, we're gonna tell you head straight up right away. Our goal is to help you find good games and good developers and avoid shitty games and shitty developers. As such, I expect not very many people will let us touch their games for free. And that's the goal. D2.
Yeah.
Destiny 2?
I assume Destiny 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Destiny, I have played quite a bit. I do have an over 900 power level game, or power level character. And I have played through the raid. I did actually enjoy it. I thought it was quite good. But there is this stink of microtransactioniness that was in the game from back when it was published by Activision. And I think that that's another publisher that needs to be on the shit list. Activision has shown in recent times that it is very aggressive with monetization practices. It is very aggressive with putting gambling into games. It is very aggressive with trying to encourage people to spend more on games after their initial purchase that should have been the first, or the total purchase, the whole game. And it's something that drives me up the wall because I have looked up Bobby Kotick's net worth, and it is measured in the billions of dollars. Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision, is worth billions of dollars. And there are people who will defend these companies, specifically Activision and EA, by saying, oh, well, these video games are very expensive to make. That's true. They are. But Bobby Kotick could fund these games out of his own pocket. He could.
He's clearly making some money on this. Activision isn't doing too bad. And
Yeah.
to a quick earlier point, people were saying add Blizzard to the shit list. Activision is Blizzard. There is no Blizzard. Blizzard is just a name that Activision owns. That's all it is.
Blizzard stopped existing when Blizzard North shut down.
Yeah. Blizzard North was the one that made all the original, unique, interesting content. Activision
including
is just
Rock and Roll Racing.
Yeah.
Rock and Roll Racing was great. I love that game.
Blackthorn, Lost Vikings. If you haven't played Lost Vikings and you like a puzzle game, it is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Superb puzzle game. And you can play it on an SNES emulator, because that's where it was.
And the purchase of Blizzard was particularly offensive to me because I really did love Blizzard North's games. I loved them a lot. I played the heck out of it. Anything that had Blizzard's name on it, I would buy it.
Every single franchise
until that Activision buyout. That was when they noticeably changed their monetization, the pacing of their games, the way that they're designed.
Hit me on Discord, Narield, and I will make sure you get set up with Lost Vikings. I've got everything you need, no matter what operating system you're running. You can join our Discord on the link below. I will get you hooked up. What I do.
Langston, Overwatch, I mean, there's a lot of problems with the monetization in that game, including the fact that I did not want to buy the collector's edition, but I couldn't find any other way to buy it because they hid the standard edition in their digital store in such a way that you are almost forced to buy the deluxe edition for $60 rather than $40. But it is actually a pretty good game. But again, now with Mike Morhaime gone, with all the other original Blizzard guys gone, Overwatch 2 is coming out. And I don't think it's going to be very good. I think it's going to be riddled with microtransactions. Like Diablo 4, I am huge on Diablo. I even played Diablo 3, the least loved of the series, for years. And I can't buy it because I know it's an Activision game.
We are consciously making sacrifices on a day-to-day basis for our own gaming that we're like, I really want this, but it's bad. Not that the game's bad, the practice is bad. Blizzard is on the list. I won't give them their own spot because they don't deserve their own spot.
Can you though, Langston? Like, I can understand people wanting to give a pass for just cosmetic, but it's also Overwatch is less egregious. But if they're going to fund the game's continuous development by requiring microtransactions and building a culture around having microtransactions, then the base game should be free. That should be your monetization.
100%. If you're paying for the game, you've bought the game. If you're not paying for the game, they can go ahead and monetize in other ways. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. Can't do both. No good.
Well, with that though, that being said, it's because skins and cosmetics are an ongoing development thing, and that's why they cost money like that. If they were just all there, then sure. But since they keep making more and releasing more content, they do have to pay those designers something.
Trust me, they have made enough money off of Overwatch. They have made enough money off of Overwatch.
But it is still less egregious than the pay to wins. It is.
Yes, it is less egregious. I still don't like it.
I'm going to use. Go ahead, Sudo.
If in any use case, if microtransactions are okay, or if the freemium model is something that can be done like properly or well, or what's something that we can do with this industry? Because I doubt that we're going to be able to ever just kill this thing or take it overnight. I think this freemium model will always kind of exist in some way, shape, or form, regardless of.
And I'm totally okay with that. I really think when we were talking about Dota 2 and League that is the right way to do it. League is maybe worse than Dota 2, but still the right way to do it. They have a much larger base pool of sales in League due to their multi-hero and then skins for the hero setup. Probably the more profitable configuration.
there's also this concept of full-priced games that have continuous development going on, aka live services, or as I like to call them, fee-to-pay games. Not fee to play, fee to pay, because you have to keep buying shit. Like Anthem, for instance, that the base game is actually like designed to be unfulfilling. It is not designed to be a good game. It's designed to get you just enough of a hook in you that you want to keep playing it, and you're like, ah, man, I wish this just had some more content. And then they release content that should have been in the game in the first place for $10, $15. And again, coming back to a game that we were very pleased with earlier, Payday 2, uh, it can be done well. Payday 2 had a complete game on release. It was I don't remember the price of it. I think it was a $40 game on release, but it was a complete game. And then they added on significant pieces of additional content for an additional fee. And honestly, I'm totally fine with that because you're getting a meaningful upgrade out of these additional purchases. You're not just getting skins.
Yeah. I'm going to touch real quick on Langston's point on the BlizzCon because with Blizzard's soiree into politics there, I think we need to make one quick, simple statement. Games and politics don't mix. Fuck off, Blizzard. Okay, done. We can move on.
Which I think honestly was what they were trying to say. They just went about it all wrong. It should have been, hey, games and politics don't mix. If anybody does this in the future at all, there will be severe punishment. Severe.
They went the wrong way.
But this
completely.
was, they went straight to the severe punishment.
And beyond severe punishment, they docked him his prize money.
That is severe punishment. Like, they not only have they potentially killed his career by banning him for a large period of time, initially a year, now 6 months. It's revoking his prize money means he basically can't live for those 6 months.
Yep. Go find another job. What they said. Has no place. At worst, they should be punishing the interviewers in the broadcasting company. But they can't. It wasn't even on their broadcast. It was after the show on a separate stream that he talked about all this. After
the interviewers were fired.
Yeah, the interviewers were fired, and I don't agree with that either. Because
I don't agree with that either.
Like it was a technically, I believe it was. He got the money back, but the suspension was only reduced to 6 months, which is still enough to kill an esports player's career. Like, imagine you just don't see, I don't know, you don't see Jaedong at a StarCraft 2 tournament for 6 months. You go, well, what happened to Jaedong? Oh, I guess he's not playing anymore. Let me just go follow. I don't even know who's playing StarCraft 2 these days. Let me go follow Flash's games instead, or whoever you're following.
StarCraft 2 is dominated by a whole bunch of people with tendonitis.
Yeah, it is a mechanically very difficult game to play. But that's beside the point.
Yeah, that's separate time.
This is something that can completely kill somebody's career, just immediately.
Yeah, they had no place choosing either side. By punishing them, they're choosing a side.
Yeah, they need to say, if anybody does any political thing on our platform, you're cut, and they need to know that up front. They had very loose wording in the contract that allowed them to do this, and it was not sufficient, for instance.
Do you know who the developers are on AoE 4? Langston's saying AoE 4 is announced. I'm asking if he knows who made it.
Relic under Microsoft. Made in Vancouver, actually, I believe.
Interesting.
Shit.
Right on.
If Relic's still making games, Yeah,
Yep.
why not? They make good games.
Funded by Microsoft, made by Relic. See, the game world is confusing this way. You've got a producer who puts the money up, and that's usually the name you see. And then you've got a developer. The developer gets more they're more of the design and construction of the game, but the producer will have some input and a little bit of control because they can start pulling moves like, well, if you don't do this, we're not going to follow through with this market or push you this far forward. And that's how you get some really interesting games where it's like, it's my favorite developer as well as somebody on the shit list all at the same time, like Sekiro. Because it's FromSoft and it's awesome and it's awesomely put together and it's such a good game and it's funded by Activision. Oh,
Or
come
like
on.
Doom 2016. You know, idsoft, incredible game engine builders, and Doom 2016 is a phenomenal game, but it's published by Bethesda.
So while we love Doom, it does give money to Bethesda and it made it hard.
Yeah, we did touch on that, Langston. Langston just brought up that the biggest microtransaction criminals are sports games.
Yeah.
And we did touch on the fact that they are both turning into online casinos and very, very egregious with their monetization practices.
Oh, I lost my shirt. I'll show you my one of my favorite shirts. I'm gonna be getting it for some of these streams. One of my favorites. If I can find it again. I cannot. I'll just buy it.
Well,
See it one day.
while you're abandoning the search for that shirt, I think we should probably get back onto our topic for the day.
Absolutely.
How we've well,
Well, let's talk about that.
Langston.
Bungie Soft.
Bungie, I have mixed feelings on Bungie. They did make some very excellent games. They did. They made some really, really good games. Like, I was not a huge Halo fan. I thought it was all right. I really enjoyed the campaigns. I had no interest in their multiplayer. But the way that they allowed Destiny 2 to be monetized because of what Activision was saying really did rub me the wrong way. It was very reminiscent of a lot of the practices that are used in mobile games, very much encouraging people to spend money in order to feel like they're part of a community. Like the fact that they did not initially have text or voice chat in the game. You had to use third-party applications. And that isolation and the only interaction you see with other people in community areas is the announcement that they just got a piece of loot. That's all you see. And then sitting in the tower when Destiny 2 had initially launched was very, very enlightening as far as like what they were doing for monetization. Because if you just chilled in the tower for about half an hour, you'd see people land at the tower, they'd roll up to Eververse, and then you'd just see a string of items shoot up in chat being like, so and so just unlocked these 15 items, and you know that they paid for all of that and you can't chat, but they'll tell you when somebody else gives them money.
Yep, that's my experience in Destiny 2.
It's gotten a lot better. Bungie has recovered the game quite a bit, and the move away from Activision as a publisher, I think, was a very good one. But it's still something that very much rubbed me the wrong way at the time. No, strong disagree with that, R. Langston. Strong disagree with WB Games for Great. Strong disagree.
They're pretty far in that microtransaction.
Yeah, give me some examples. What's their worst
Shadow of
offender?
Mordor.
Yeah, Shadow of
Even
Mordor,
though I
Shadow
enjoyed
of
the hell
War.
out of the second one, it's still just like it's Yeah, it is bad. It is bad what they're doing.
Yeah, very offensive with their microtransactions. The original Arkham Asylum was great. I loved that game. It was just a straight up buy the game, go play it. It's fun. But Arkham City and whatever the new one is were open world, microtransaction packed, just like essentially Batman Skyrim, where they tried to encourage you to buy all sorts of microtransaction DLC in order to, you know, make things look different. And it was definitely not appreciated.
That's a shame. I wasn't a big fan of those Batman games. Didn't do it for me, but you didn't see any in Arkham anywhere?
You must have been playing around launch then, because they were added later. They avoided having them in at launch to keep it out of the review cycle, which is another thing that companies have started doing. They have started adding in microtransactions after launch in order to have the reviews like blah, 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 blah,
Chew on
have
your
the
tongue for a
review
second.
cycle show that, hey, there's no microtransactions in this game. Isn't that great? Oh wait, here they come.
Sneaky, sneaky. Well, now they're going to start throwing them in the game right away because they're not even letting them review the games anymore.
Yeah. They're not gonna let you. They're not gonna let you review a game. So why bother hiding it?
The absolute best thing you can do at this point, wait till the game comes out, check out some streamers playing it. Hopefully people who like the same kind of games you like, because most streamers aren't going to give a critical review. I've been going around watching everybody play the new Jedi as I'm playing it, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's a great game! It's a great game! It's really really good. You gotta go play it." Yeah, I mean, pretty good,
Yeah,
but it's not as good as they're making it out
it's
to be.
solid.
Yeah,
It's a solid game.
and every time I see a reviewer or a streamer play a game, I never hear them say bad things about the game. They're always talking about how much they like it. For me,
Yeah, and I mean there is something to be said for, specifically as a streamer, phrasing things and framing things positively to encourage more money to come your way, to encourage a positive community to be built in your chat room. But I also feel it's at least a little disingenuous to not acknowledge the problems.
yeah, we can create a positive, happy community and still be honest about what a game is. I don't have to suck the game's dick just because I'm playing. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Like I'm playing, granted off stream, but I'm also playing through Fallen Order, and it's also like it's solid. It's not a great game. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. It's not by any stretch of the imagination a bad game. And I think, frankly, like Respawn has done truly wonderful things with their graphics engine, and it's a development company that I want to support, but that's not to say that it is without flaws. Like the highest difficulty is very poorly balanced.
Yeah, I'm playing through on it, and I can get through it. I think the highest difficulty would be quite fun if they just adjusted the parry timing slightly. I want to be a parrying god, and the timing on it is just so tight that it's frustrating.
Yeah, very difficult to actually get into.
Same problem I have with Outer Worlds. The highest difficulty makes the difficulty interesting, but all the extra survival stuff they add in makes the game funky and onerous to play. I'm not having fun. I'm just worrying about finding food and water all the time.
I don't play games to worry about finding food and water. I do that enough in real life.
Yes. Yes, real life. The quest for food and water. And a good
and
game.
Occasionally shelter and good video games.
Yeah. Yeah, food, water, and video games. And maybe some shelter. Epic probably needs to be on the head to the shit
They're
list.
they're probably the top one actually. We never talked about Fortnite. What the hell that's done?
Yes.
That's almost like
So,
the
Pseudo,
catalyst
I'll let you
for-
go off on Fortnite for a little bit here.
Oh boy. Okay, so
Maybe we could even talk about the lawsuit that's pending against them.
I think it's lawsuits at this point.
Yeah, the big class action one though is the one I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. I know which one you're referring to. All right. So, as many people probably noticed, microtransactions were slow and steady for like around 2010 upwards, and then lately there has been a giant jump in publishers that are shoving this down studios' throats, and as well as the kind of crux of every game now needs to have a battle royale mode with skins. And that is because of Fortnite and how much money they have made. They have, I'm not gonna
It's
say gross, but
staggering.
at least revenue just from that, from their free to play game, is over $1 billion, which is insane. And every single other publisher and any executive in any of these companies is gonna look at that and be like, holy shit, I want that. This is what I need. This is what we need. And it's like, yeah, but our game is nothing like this. It's like, no, we need battle royale with microtransactions. I don't care. I don't care if it's Tetris. We're battle royaling it with microtransactions. We need it.
And the best
So
part is they stick that battle royale mode onto a $60 game rather than a free game.
yeah, and then the other thing I want to talk about, this also kind of refers back to my other point of kind of what does this mean for AAA games and what does this mean for the industry as a whole. This has given Epic so much money, and I'm sure as many people have seen, Epic has been using this in a way that I don't think any of us really like. Mostly being like, now we have a competitor, but instead of making our product better, we are just going to restrict what our competitors can actually have, and we're going to go the exclusive way. Which now you see that most games are a lot of games nowadays that are or even like more indie will be approached by them and say, "We'll give you all this money right now if you don't put your game on Steam or if you don't put your game on any other platform except for us, or even if it's like a 6 month delay." And like, I'm happy that there's more competitors, and I'm happy that it drives the Steam cut down. But I feel like the way they're doing it is terrible and a little bit terrifying, and they have so much money that they can get away with a lot nowadays.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a very important point while you were getting that across in that the competition is good. It's very good for the industry. It's just that the way that Epic is going around doing it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It's making it more anti-consumer just to be able to muscle their way into the market.
Yeah, like I totally love there to be like Steam competitors. It's even like they've been good, and like they have like at least Steam's been good about like adding features to their platform for a long time. But when you compare it to the current Epic store, like it doesn't compare in any way, shape, or form, and Epic's lacking a lot of stuff. But now they're finding they don't really need to add stuff because the money they can spend for that they can spend on just forcing developers to be exclusive, and then now consumers that want to play that game have to play it on that DRM, and they're kind of just put in a tough spot. And then not only that, but since they were doing it and they're making money, now a lot of other publishers are saying, "Hey, wait, we can kind of do this too." And a lot of publishers have had their own stores, such as Ubisoft's Uplay and EA's Origin, but now they kind of want to do their own thing, their own Game Pass, their own this, and then now a consumer nowadays that wants to, play PC games has to have 6 to 7 or 8 different DRMs installed on their machine just to play, the library of games they want. Well, versus consoles, you just have your discs or you just have your downloadable things.
As a note to that one, Jedi from EA is on Steam, but it has to launch through Origin. So you have to have them both installed, and when you click play on Steam, it pulls up Origin, and then you have to log into Origin, and then Steam launches the game in Origin.
Yeah, they've like Ubisoft has the same thing with Uplay for their games.
Yeah.
And EA actually stopped doing that for a long time. EA stopped putting their games on Steam because they're losing money when they do that. So they just had Origin only, and they just recently came back and putting their games on Steam. But Ubisoft they took off Breakpoint, and they took off I think the Division 2 that weren't on Steam but only on Uplay, and then they were like shocked that they didn't sell as well. And it's like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, the reason why Steam has the markups they do is because they have this giant audience of people that they can, when your game gets launched and they put a big banner on the homepage, like millions and millions of people see that, and it's a lot of advertisement for that, right?
Yep.
But like, yeah, I hate the whole like I launch a DRM to launch my DRM and have two accounts that are now tied to them, and either one of these companies can pull my license, and then I lose my game.
Or just go out of business.
Yeah. Well, I mean, realistically,
No.
neither of those companies is very likely to go out of business.
No.
But it is something that could happen. And I just wanted to bring up a potentially controversial point in that I actually don't think Origin is a bad launcher. I think it's a totally fine launcher in store. I have no problem with it. And for a long time, EA was actually more customer friendly than Valve. Valve was not customer friendly. They did not have a return policy. There was no way to
I
get
remember that.
any sort of recompense. And EA came out swinging with, hey, we've got this return policy. You don't like a game? Return it. Guess what? We're going to be giving out some games every once in a while. You can just have them. They're just free.
EA, yeah,
And
they give out games every time they launch a game as an apology for their game launch.
basically. and they go, hey, that early access game that you got into, if that game doesn't actually come out, we'll just give you your money back. Like we'll just do that. Like they're a lot more customer friendly than Steam is in a lot of ways.
Well, we're at least, but that's where like the competition is good because that forced Steam to step up, implement their refunds, implement all that stuff.
Well, we're talking before the point where you could even return a game.
Yeah,
Langston.
I'm just saying like it's nice to have that.
Langston is talking in chat, and he's saying he's only ever had to return one. He's never had a problem with their customer support, but we're talking about they didn't even have a return policy. There was no way to return a game. It couldn't be done. You bought it, it's done. Period. You removed it from your account, oh well, you've removed it. It was only after Origin came out as a competitor that forced all these changes. And this is why we're saying competition is a good thing. Competition improves the market for the purchaser. What it does. My mistaste towards Origin was just that when it came out, it was a buggy pile of shit that caused my computer to blue screen every time I tried to open it. So
yeah, and I mean that's legit. That's legit. But it has gotten a lot better.
Well, I'm glad they've stopped the blue screening process.
Yeah,
Borderlands 3 has no bugs. Yeah,
absolutely none.
Did you watch any of our playthrough, Narield? Have you actually watched us play Borderlands 3? I have to ask because that's our catchphrase while we play it. Okay, awesome.
And that sort of back to our point about these different stores, it's something that competition causes the entire market to grow. And there's something about the way that Epic is doing things that leaves a bad taste, and it's that in a lot of ways they're just muscling their way through with money. Like they don't even have a shopping cart. There is no shopping cart on the Epic Games Store. If you want to buy more than one video game, you have to make individual purchases for all of them. Like that is so basic to having a store that every online store has a shopping cart. Not Epic. Epic says, nah, the user will just take care of that.
Yeah, like they're not even really like that's the one thing I really hate about it. It's like not that they're a competitor, but they're not really a competitor in the sense of like comparing products. It's just like, well, we're just gonna have the games you want to play, so we know how to actually target the consumer directly. And sure you can make your platform as good as possible with cloud saves and streaming and chat systems and hosting servers, but I mean like if the game's not on your store, then like you can't do anything about that. And it's kind of putting the industry in a tough spot because like how is Steam and Valve really supposed to compete with that besides just offering those games more money to put the game on their store or a bigger cut, which I'm okay with the bigger cut part, but it's harder just to like buy out these games. And then what are we going to start seeing like Steam exclusive games and stuff like that? And we're going to turn into the whole like PS4, Xbox kind of console exclusives where now if you want to play either game as a console enthusiast, you have to like buy both systems just for that single game.
Yeah, and we don't really want that either. That's not good. But it is something that's never going to go away.
Consumers.
Exclusives will never ever go away. It's always going to be a thing. And I'm not going to be surprised to see it expand. It's been a thing since the Atari. Which early consoles do I buy?
one of the most infamous exclusives.
On the console level, it does at least make sense for a bit because there is a huge cost in developing or porting games to other hardware. But at least for PC, it's like you have a PC. This software can run, but you now have to have this other software in front of it that you have to pay for to be able to run it. When like the hardware itself can pay, it's weird to have exclusive on a platform that it's like an artificial software restriction rather than just being able to play the game.
No, draconian rights management, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a much wider spread problem than video games when you get into that one. So let's not dive into that one too much because we'll be here all night not talking about video games.
But I do think console vendor funded video games have a place.
Yep.
I think it allows people who are funded by console vendors slash manufacturers to make games that they otherwise would not be able to make, and to make them in such a way that the publisher does not force them to rely on recurring monetization like microtransactions and DLC, um, much like Bloodborne, for instance. I do not for a second think that Bloodborne would exist without Sony's help. I don't think that From Software had the money to make that game and have two parallel development teams running at the same time without Sony's help.
Yeah.
I do wish it had been a timed exclusive, because I would love to have that game on PC. It would run so much better. It runs like garbage on PS4. But it's a game that we would not otherwise have had.
We've got a decent shit list. I think if you see these names and you avoid them, you'll be doing okay. They're the core of the AAA toxicity. So in the last bit of time, what developers should we be buying? Who's making the games that actually deserve support nowadays? They are very widespread, and we sacrifice sometimes to not play them, or, as Langston was saying, yo ho, a pirate's life for me.
Though we do not condone piracy. That is not something that we can do.
One thing about piracy nowadays too is that a lot of the freemium models are actually stemming from piracy, especially in the mobile market. It's kind of one of the reasons why that market got so huge for mobile gaming, is because it is insanely easy, at least on Android, to get access to pirated games.
Yeah.
But so now what the developers are forced to do is to make their games always online and require server connections. And then to do that, they had to use the freemium model to support those servers. Yep. So it's kind of just even like people say that like piracy would help the sector a lot, and it's like in some cases it made it a whole lot worse because people are pirating all the mobile games. There is now a super terrible mobile market for the gaming industry, and
absolutely.
Like gaming on phones is something that could have been like, we are so far behind of what we could be doing. Like phones nowadays can run pretty decent games and do some pretty good stuff, but because of the ability for people just to pirate them, no one wanted to actually do that. Like no one wanted to make like fantastic games on mobile, because why would they if they could do that? And then they have to make them only online, and then now they have to make them freemium.
Yep. Your printer can run Doom OG, so can your phone. I'm pretty sure you can get OG Doom on your phone. Pretty sure.
My favorite thing I've seen recently of can it run Doom is the touch bar on the new Mac.
Which it turns out, yes, it can.
Fantastic. Like
that's amazing.
Yeah, like
I want to play touch bar Doom.
Yeah, it's like the resolution for it is hilarious and it looks hilarious. But yeah, they ran Doom.
Excellent. So yeah, I'm not condoning pirating. In fact, like I was saying, I put money into games just because it's a good game. It's well built. I want those developers to keep making games. I bought Dark Souls 7 times. I bought Sekiro twice. I've bought Outer Worlds twice now. These games that are worth buying, I'll buy them. Give them to me.
I bought the original Modern Warfare COD 4 like 7 times, something like that, 7 or 8. And I've only ever played it on PC. It's the only platform I've ever had it, but I kept losing my CD key, so I just kept buying new ones because I loved that game.
LucasArts was involved in, or no, Lucasfilm was. I'm not sure LucasArts exists anymore.
LucasArts unfortunately does not exist anymore, but Lucasfilm did get involved in the publishing of Fallen Order.
They probably helped with assets and stuff like that, I'd imagine. Because that game has some fucking awesome assets.
Oh yeah, it's gorgeous.
I love the assets. The stormtroopers and stuff are beautifully done.
Oh, a Dark Forces remaster would be so dope. I would play the heck out of that.
And it's unfortunate that we're holding out for remaking old games that were good because we've lost hope that new games are going to be good. That's sad.
That says a lot about the AAA industry.
The current state of where things are going.
And it's something I find interesting is that it's sort of given a rise to a AA developer, not necessarily a AAA publishing house with all these studios under them, blah blah blah, but people that are making very visually impressive and very thought out, very compelling games that are either self-published or like done through some other publisher, but it's done all in-house and then just put out there as a good video game. Like Senua or Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. That was done by a studio of like less than 100 people. Less than $1 million was spent on its development, and it's great. It's a fantastic game.
I haven't played it.
Or CD Projekt Red. They're not associated with any publishers. They are a AA developer. They release compelling, fully featured games that you can then buy expansions for.
While I'm not per se a big fan of Witcher 3, it's a beautifully put together game with a very vivid world, fairly well written, compelling dialogue.
Oh yeah, I love the character writing in Witcher. I was not a fan of Witcher 3 as a game, but I love the character writing. I love the world. I enjoyed the heck out of playing Witcher 2 once I got over my my resistance to semi-open world games. But like they make good video games. They do. They don't have to have a big publishing house to it.
Why does 2K belong on the shit list?
Oh, they made that NBA 20K and stuff. They have been the worst for microtransactions lately.
Is it them or is it EA that's driving that?
No, it's 2K.
No, 2K is a publishing house.
Okay.
And they are awful.
Noted.
Yeah, they're like up there basically with like Epic in my opinion of just like companies that need to just kind of probably disappear a bit or just go away.
The one thing that made me glad was at least the Borderlands IP was big enough that they avoided being poisoned by 2K.
That's
There's still a lot of studios out there that can have their free reign, but it's just the sports titles, man. It's such a weird market.
I don't need this to be AA or AAA. I do want to get a list of some developers that people should be spending money on, though. So I'm going to add one out of my heart that I'm sure absolutely nobody in the panel will have any sort of an argument with here. I absolutely love Supergiant.
Oh yeah,
I've played everything they've done.
Supergiant is wonderful. Like, I got, how far was I in? I think I was like 25 minutes into Transistor, and I was just like, oh my god, this game is amazing. Tab out, went and bought the premium version of the soundtrack and lossless quality off their website, and like bought all the art books and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say Starbreeze belongs on the good developers list.
Who are they?
I wish they would release Payday 3 already.
Oh, they're
they're very
developers?
good. Yeah, they're very much like a single or AA developer, but they're quite good.
Excellent. I strongly recommend everybody, buy Outer Worlds. Even if you don't play it, buy it. Buy it. Every game that this team
just
has
don't
ever
buy it on
made.
the Epic Store.
Yeah. I had to. It was the only place I could get it at the time.
Yep. Epic. I got it through Game Pass.
Yeah, I wanted to actually own it, not just play it for the month.
Yeah, that's sort of how I feel about the whole Game Pass thing as well. Like, a bunch of my friends got the Origin Game Pass in order to just have Jedi Fallen Order for cheap, and I didn't want to do that because I wanted money to go to Respawn and not to show EA that, hey, your whole catalog is worth money. I think Respawn's games are worth money.
Yeah. We can add them.
The monetization for the Game Pass stuff is pretty terrible for the developers, but they still get money if you play their games.
Yeah, just not as much.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm all for buying. And that's just Transistor we talked about, but Supergiant has done a few different games and they were all beautiful. Bastion.
Oh, they're all fantastic.
They're
wonderful,
all
wonderful games.
Beautifully animated, beautifully hand drawn, beautiful fluid control, compelling, not necessarily very long, they're not big budget, but they've spent the money where it matters, which is what we see in Obsidian's Outer Worlds as well. The number one complaint you hear about the game is it's too short. Well, it's short and small because it's a small company with a small budget. They spent the money on making the facial rigging work properly and getting facial expression across and doing writing properly and fixing bugs. I haven't hit any bugs really. It's amazing.
There's been a few bugs, but they've patched them recently. It's been decent. I listened to a podcast that the co-director was doing on the game, and for the most part, they put a lot of effort into Q&A with him. You know, Obsidian probably has some bit of trauma from that in the past with New Vegas launch, and now they have their own control over that now. So they made a fairly polished game.
Obsidian,
on the note of saying,
sorry, but
saying
Obsidian also changed.
Yeah. On the note of like not buying an Epic Store, this game is coming out on Steam, so I am not buying it until it comes out on like all the other platforms.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's kind of just like I want to support them, but I'm not going to support them through Epic. Like I can't personally and just like because that's what they want to do, right? They'll know that people will buy it then, and as much as I love the studio and stuff like that, they still, you know.
And that's going to send a nice message. If they open it up on Steam later and then all of a sudden a whole bunch of people buy it because they were waiting for Steam to have it, the developers are going to go, maybe we should have launched it on Steam or everywhere. Maybe that extra money we got to sit everywhere. On one wasn't worth it. Maybe we shouldn't have alienated a quarter of our market.
So we've talked we've ranted and raved basically on the microtransaction models and how everything's terrible. I do think we should spend the rest of the time kind of talking about what the individual can do and what we should do and what the industry can kind of do to start counteracting what's happening before it becomes too late, as well as maybe finishing off on kind of a bit of scare factor of what this will lead to if nothing is done and we just keep letting this happen.
Sounds like a plan. I mean, other than buy from the right side and don't buy the left side.
Yeah, but like as I was saying before, with some of this, it's going to get to the point where that doesn't matter anymore.
Yep.
If we let it go. So we'll start off on that. So
you go ahead.
AAA games,
educate
where
us.
They're going right now. Sure. So AAA games, where they're going right now, they're seeing this mobile freemium model, and they're getting pretty excited. They're getting very excited on the profits they're making. They're getting very excited on the kind of idea of, you know, instead of making the game and trying to sell it to thousands and millions, we can make the game for hundreds or thousands and make even more money. So to the point what I was trying to say is eventually voting with your wallet won't matter because the people, like, they just don't care about us anymore. They won't care about us trying to spend $60 on a game. They're all going to be focused on the people who will spend $60,000 on a game and make games for them. And at that point, I think that, at least with AAA studios, because they're the ones who mostly focus on this, have the budget to, is we're going to start seeing some super terrible games that everyone's going to say is terrible and reviews and stuff, but they're going to keep doing it because they're going to be making money. And at the end of the day, that is what is important. And I'm not saying that's not a bad thing. What I'm saying is, like, without something in place or without action or without regulations or something, they'll be able to do this. And that's what we're going to start seeing.
Thank you very much for the follow, GlenCon.
So that being said, what can we really do, or what can really happen to prevent this model of, instead of making games that we try to sell to the masses, we just make these games that target these people that have a proneness to addiction, or these people that will go into debt to buy our game, and that's how we'll make our money through that.
That is that's a very difficult question, and I think that there's a number of routes that can be taken. I don't think the industry is going to self-regulate as much as I wish they would, and whatever the direction that is taken to solve this problem really is something that will unfortunately have to be litigated. It is something that will have to be passed as law to force these companies to step back and not just overreach into the realms of gambling, into the realms of psychological trickery, in order to get uh, those big sales to the proverbial whales.
Yeah, yeah, and then that gets a bit scary too, because we've seen how legislation in the past has worked on media and popular stuff, and that side of things can also go horribly wrong as well. So it's going to be kind of like, I'm predicting a very kind of scary time coming up with us, where like on one side of the street we have this model that's just running away rapidly, and the other side of the street, the legislation is starting to kind of wake up, and people are starting to wake up a bit. But in the tendency, what will happen is that they'll overstep, and they'll kind of over legislate what's going to go on, and the next thing you know, like it might cripple the industry itself too. So it's going to be something that none of us will really like. We can't really like, we'll have input and stuff like that, but this problem is so big and complex that it's going to take a lot of people and a lot of think tanks and a lot of kind of focus and energy from everyone to make sure that like the industry that we so care for and love and dear to our hearts that we enjoy doesn't kind of crumble from what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very difficult problem. But I think there are like some smaller steps that one that the governing institutions could take. Like uh you could, for instance, say, if you're going to buy something as part of a service, you have to know what it is that you're buying. There is no, oh, it's a magic Skinner box. You just pick one and maybe you get what you want. There's no randomness to it. You can buy specifically the thing that you want.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And another smaller thing that can be forced to be done that I think some of the European Union countries are doing is forcing companies to reveal their drop rates. I know that was a big stink with Overwatch, especially in China, because China was trying to make them do that too. Whereas if you want an item and you go to pay $5 to get it, and you realize that you only have a 0.001% chance of actually getting it, you're probably not going to spend the $5 to get it.
Well, the problem is there are enough people that will spend that $5, and then they'll spend another $5, and then they'll spend another $5, and then suddenly they're out thousands of dollars.
Yeah, but if we make them display the drop rates, the psychology tactics they're using gets a little bit affected from that. It's the same thing with displaying calorie intake with like fast foods and stuff like that. It's like, oh, people are still going to eat like 20 cheeseburgers a day, but there are still going to be a lot of people who will see that number, and it will kind of affect the choices they make and how much they're going to spend or eat and stuff like that. So there'll still be the will, but
Yeah.
it's a smaller thing. It's not like we're not going to have one single piece of legislation that's just going to solve the problem. It's going to have to be a lot of the smaller stuff that's going to kind of curve things back in the better direction. Um, that'll kind of come together as like, this is just the rule we have in place. This is why we can't sell alcohol to people who are under a certain age. We have this stuff in place, and we can only do this stuff here. You can only buy it from licensed people. It's all the smaller stuff that adds together to kind of keep the community in line and in safer environment.
And I do think that the displaying of odds is something that is a step in the right direction. I just don't think it's a big enough step. Like
GlenCon puts it
you
right.
can't enforce. Yeah, Glencon brings up a very good point in that scratch tickets must display their odds, but the manipulation is still very very effective, and scratch tickets for the lottery still make millions and millions and millions of dollars. Like it, that information being available will not stop the vast majority of purchases. It will stop a very, very small minority.
Yeah,
Like
but
we
it
were
still
talking about,
will, is my point. Like, we need the smaller stuff too, right? It's stuff that can still be done without a whole lot of effort.
it's a minimal effort, but the crux of the issue is that we're marketing this to kids who don't have the mental faculties to really even appreciate these drop rates, so they don't. It's not going to affect a large majority of the market. Really,
Yeah,
the
I know.
what needs to be done more than anything in the scope of things for legislation is recognizing this as gambling and
Yeah, but we have
regulating
to
it
be.
as such.
My point is, like, it's going to take a lot of the smaller stuff, because if we go after the big stuff directly too, that's when legislation gets kind of a bit foggy and muddy and can get kind of dangerous. And
Yep.
I wasn't saying that like adding that thing would completely solve the problem, but that and then a bunch of other stuff we can kind of crux together to help it. Because the way that I've been seeing, the way that the main way that these people kind of want to solve this online gambling problem is to force people to do the same things they do in Korea, where you now have to use your identifier to get on the internet to prove that these people are kids, so they can't access this stuff in games. And like, that's something I definitely don't want for us in the West. And if we can start kind of doing smaller stuff to start circumventing before we get to the point where it's like, we can't do anything about it. This is a huge problem. It needs to be solved today. So now we're going to do this huge legislation that's going to make sure that these people can't do this, which will end up being these overbearing and kind of scary things where like, now you have to, well, kids are gambling. It's like, well, these things are still going to be here. We can't outlaw this, code, so we can, make sure the kids can't get on here, which will be all this other stuff.
What you can do is extract the microtransaction from within the game itself and put it into its own portal with verification.
I mean, like, how so? Like, through portal, through what? Like, that would still restrict a kid to get it without their parents' credit cards or information.
Well, I mean, if the kid has the credit card number and is logging into the website, then that's the parent's fault that time. But if it's
Is it
just
though? Is it though?
yes, yes, if your kid is able to grab your credit card and go online and buy things without any knowledge of yours whatsoever, you should probably be watching your kid a little bit better. Because there's far more issues than just purchasing game stuff online at that point.
Sure. So let's say your little cousin comes over and they want to play some games on your phone.
Mhm.
And you go, okay, yeah, sure, I've got, Angry Birds or whatever, and you toss your phone over to them. They play some Angry Birds. And because it's logged into your account and pre-verified, they can spend thousands of dollars on your credit card.
This is why I'm saying take it out of the game. Now they have to.
It would still be in the session.
Well, no, they'd have to go to a website, log into my account, and then make the purchases for them to appear in game. It's
like,
no work.
Maybe force some multi-factor authentication or something.
Yeah, there's so many
with
things
it.
you can do there. It's we're into the same world as actual online casinos now. Well, there are casinos on websites that do confirm identities and do all this stuff. That's been legislated, that's been regulated, that's been set up and controlled. To piggyback it onto the same processes isn't a huge leap.
That's fair. That's a fair statement. I was not aware of those systems, so that's good knowledge to have. And I do think that piggybacking it onto an existing system would make it much easier for it to be accepted both from a legislative point of view and from a public point of view. But it's also something that lobbyists and publishers are going to fight tooth and nail every step of the way.
And the people that want it are the people without any information and without any power.
Yeah.
So it's not likely to ever happen, but that is the best case scenario I could see for it. Unfortunately, it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better unless we make some major change somewhere. Which I guess is what we're talking about. What can we do to actually start that change? Or are we just screwed? Are we just circling down this tunnel of oblivion in gameplay that we're never going to get out of again? Will we never see another Dark Souls? Will we never see another Chrono Trigger?
I don't know that it is, for certain doom and gloom, but it is definitely a very difficult position to be in without some sort of outside monitoring of how games are monetized, because the way that we are going now is a very slippery slope, and it's something that we are well along sliding down.
We're to the point of having to slap developers on the PP just to get them to make a good game.
Well, and is it so much the developer or is it the publisher? Because
Sorry, we're smack the publisher on the PP to make them make a good game.
These separate entities do confuse the issue a lot as well, especially when those publishers are also developers. Like Bethesda is both a publishing house and a software developer.
They're games that add difficulty. No, they don't add difficulty just for the sake of difficulty.
Strongly disagree.
The difficulty is not in the game just to be difficult. Difficulty has a very, very strong tie into the emotional response of the game, into the story of the game, into the very core of the game. It's difficult for a very specific reason. It creates a very specific atmosphere with it. The games are a work of pure art once you actually get into it. And just here's the problem. There's a super, super, super steep learning curve with a little hump at the top that you got to get over before you can actually enjoy the game. So 99% of people got their ass kicked and went, I hate this game because it's too hard. And they never got over that little learning curve that makes it totally playable and totally progressible and the most fun game you'll ever play.
That is rolling back and dodging and blocking for 5 minutes just to land one hit is not an accurate representation of those games.
That's an accurate representation of somebody who hasn't fully learned how to play the game yet.
I'll speak a bit about this because I'm someone who's actually new to Dark Souls and someone who's played a lot of games before. I've played quite a few games that are difficult for the sake of being difficult. I have beaten I Want to Be the Guy. That game is difficult for the sake of being difficult.
You beat that game?
You beat it, yeah.
I beat it on the higher difficulties too. Yeah, it is. I've played these games difficult. So like, that game is designed in a way if you're walking and then an apple just falls from nowhere and kills you. This game, you'll beat a boss and there's no save. You'll walk out and there's just a cliff, and you just jump off and you just have to know where to land. And there's a little bit of water that you land in that's the size of your character, and you just have to find out where that is, which means you die and you have to fight the boss over and over and over again. It took me like 5 tries to beat freaking Mike Tyson, the first boss. You go to the right and there's just nothing, and you jump and you die and you got to do it again. Like, that is stupid. I play Dark Souls, I walk up and I get my ass kicked by some skeletons. I get pissed off. I'm like, this is dumb. But if I practice and I get good enough at the mechanics, I know how to parry, I know when to block, it is actually kind of fun. It just gives you that challenge of like, I can improve, I can get the Twitch skills I need to beat this stuff. That being said, that's not for everyone, and I understand that, but it's not really difficult for the sake of being difficult. It's difficult because it's supposed to be also a personal development in the game, that you personally get better at the game to beat it, and that's where the wall comes from. And it is kind of frustrating for people to play a game that kicks their ass, but that's kind of how a lot of people feel. A lot of people who haven't played video games feel when they play other games, where it's like, it's an art form that will beat you up and then laugh in your face, and like, you don't look at a piece of art that just beats you up and laughs at your face like it is with video games. But I don't really agree that it is difficult for the sake of being difficult. I believe they made it difficult in the way that it is still possible to beat it, and it's not like you're really cheesing mechanics. It's just, well, you have to actually sit down and kind of learn, how can I make this better? How can I, deal with the situation? It's not like I Want to Be the Guy, where it's just like, well, I'm going to just have to die a bunch of times to figure out, the cheesy way to get through this level.
The other mistaken view on Dark Souls is that it's a memorization game. And you just gotta die on the boss over and over and over again until you've learned all his moves and memorized all his patterns so that you can avoid them. That's not true either. That's people that haven't gotten over that learning curve. Once you get over the learning curve, you begin to intuit behaviors. You see the lead up and you figure out what the animation is going to be before you've ever even seen it, just because things move organically and things make sense. You do play the game long enough, you will get to the point where you begin to dodge and roll and flow with the game, and you're in combat constantly. Starting to feel like a badass. Yeah. Not for everybody, I agree, but fantastic.
Yeah. Definitely not for everybody. I feel like that's something that From Software did just so excellently in all of their games, is that they tie your personal progression to feeling powerful in game. The better you are at playing their video game, the more powerful you feel in game. Like Sekiro, for instance. Sekiro has no way to increase your damage without beating bosses. That is the only way that you can increase your damage. That's it. But as you get better at understanding how the core mechanics of Sekiro's combat system work, you find that you feel powerful even without these upgrades, just because every time there's a sword coming at you, you know that, okay, that sword is coming, I need to press left bumper now in order to do a perfect parry and break his posture so that you can run him through with your sword. Like, this is a very satisfying feeling, and it is something that is very difficult to do. It is difficult to learn, it is difficult to master, but when you do, when you understand how the game works, then you feel powerful. It's
Okay,
not your stats that make you powerful.
let's
It's you that makes you powerful.
let's go back to the monetization now that we've sucked FromSoft's dick for a little while here.
I get very passionate about From Software.
We all do now. We all do.
So just to kind of extend on that too, because I wanted to bring up like kind of worst case scenarios of what'll happen if the industry keeps going.
Yes, please.
So I'm not in any way saying that this is going to happen with FromSoft, but currently we do know that from like the publisher for FromSoft is Activision. So Activision could see that they have a pretty good game, pretty addictive game that people like, and the main crux of it is that it is hard. And I'm sure there are quite a few executives right now that are kind of like, hey, we could, make it easier if you pay a little bit of money. They probably, I wouldn't be surprised if there were meetings where they wanted to say like, hey, why don't we put in some microtransactions? Why don't we actually make it the game where, how about you have a few characters and then when they die, you have to wait 5 minutes before you can play that character again unless you pay some money. This is all stuff that is like, it's not saying it's ever really going to happen, but it is still possible. And I feel like if the industry runs the way it does, we can see games that'll have shit like this in them.
All of your examples have been in other games too.
Yeah, like that's where I pulled them from. I've
Yep.
had this experience of
They're
my
legitimate.
character died. Now I just pay it as my money to play him right now. And like as you said, they'll be labeled as sellouts and burned at the stake if they do, but they won't be because we have seen this happen, and it happens at a gradual level. And then what'll happen is there will be the community that goes ooh rah rah and freaks out, but then there's still a lot of people who will still buy it, and a lot of people who will still play it, and they're waiting for the time where that number of people is enough for it to be worth it to them to piss off a part of the community to actually still make their money.
Interestingly, on your note, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but FromSoft has been under quite a bit of pressure from Activision for the last little while to add an easy mode to Sekiro.
And so far, thankfully, they have refused to do it.
Yep. That's actually why I went back and like, oh, geez, I better go finish that game before they put an easy mode in. You don't want to be the guy that beat it after easy mode came out.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah, that's all you can do.
this is a little off the rails, but the way that difficulty levels interact with the tuning of a video game's pacing can very much reduce its quality, and it's something that we've brought up several times already today with Jedi Fallen Order, in that Grandmaster difficulty just feels wrong. And that's something that From Software has avoided by tuning the game so tightly and so specifically that this is the difficulty it's at. You will be about this power level. This is what you'll be capable of. This is exactly what we can make the enemies capable of, and make sure that the player still has a good time.
It's a lot of work to make a combat system that is tight, difficult, and fun. And that a whole lot of companies are finding this out because we've got this massive trend of Souls-like games all coming out. Like, hey, look, hard combat's fun. Everybody wants hard combat. Let's make hard combat. No. Not a single Souls-like game has been anywhere near as good as Dark.
No. There have been several that have been good games.
Yep.
They're good.
Playable.
There's nothing wrong with them. It's just they're not as good. They're not masterpieces.
Still not Dark Souls. There's a reason that Dark Souls still has thousands of in Twitch all the time, at any minute. Dark Souls 1, a PS3 game, thousands of people. Make New Game Plus difficulty, so there's no learning curve as much as less grinding at difficulty. See, I don't think they need to make their games for the masses. There is a large niche of gamers like me, like Rage, that have been gaming for a long time and like a difficult game and need the challenge for the massive enjoyment. I get a huge shot of adrenaline when I fight one of those bosses and kill it for the first time. Huge shot of adrenaline. It is an addiction. FromSoft bosses are an addiction. They are
But
that
at least
good
it
at
doesn't
making
cost you
bosses.
money every time.
Yeah, no, you just buy the game and you get them all. Yeah, it's I can't even explain it. I didn't like the game at all for a long time. I actually started playing it. I got my ass kicked. I got my ass kicked. I got my ass kicked. I watched 5 minutes of Lobos do a parry the world run, and suddenly I understood. I have not stopped playing them since. And they do have New Game Plus for higher difficulties in those games. So it's just
On the note of Lobos, he beat Bloodborne New Game Plus 7 fist only. Like, once you understand how these games work, you can go pretty far with that.
Is there anything else anyone would like to touch on? As time is starting to run low.
You know, I think I think much like Pseudo was saying earlier, that this is a very large problem and that it's something that is going to be very difficult for anybody to come up with a solution for. We've put forward a couple of different possibilities, a couple of different steps that could be taken. But I think we all came to the agreement that the industry is not going to stop this themselves. They're not going to stop.
There's not a lot we can do as individuals, but we can do our best to punish the companies that do the shit by not giving them our money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rockstar should definitely probably be on there.
You want to talk a little bit about why they're on there?
Sure, why not? We can talk about the whole the milking children for money from their GT Online platform with microtransactions. It's still super terrible from what I remember. I haven't played it that recently, but I don't remember there really being like loot crates or anything in it. It's just a very weird business model they have with their online currency. And then yeah,
And there
Red Dead
is
Redemption 2
literally
terrible.
a casino in Grand Theft Auto 5 now.
Right, yeah, they added that.
Literally a casino.
Real
But
money
it's
casino?
okay because we put a cap on how much you can spend on it each day.
But yeah, overall,
Wait,
like these
I don't
companies
know
will
anything about that. What do you mean casino? Like
like
There,
actual
there's
casino. It's like you go to
literally a casino.
a virtual casino, like it's like a
what do you
building
get
you
out
go
of
in.
it? Do you get real money out of it when you put real money in?
No, you get in-game items.
But it's actually in a casino.
It is
Yeah,
literally a casino.
it is like it's in the name of the expansion or the up.
Wow. That's
Yeah, they're blatant now. They know because it's like, oh, what are you gonna do about it, right? Like we're like, I, I'm trying not to be as like paranoid and as like doomsaying as possible, but I feel like we're in that like calm before the storm where like things aren't as bad right now, but it's like now is the time to start really thinking about it and start really trying to counteract what's happening because it's gonna happen faster than people realize. Where it's like, yeah, in about like a year and a year or two, all of a sudden, all we see everywhere is just microtransactions and online only games
so pay
and all
attention.
this other stuff. Yeah, it's
Basically,
like
pay attention to what you're buying. Don't just
yeah,
go out and buy a game before you've
and
seen reviews, before you know what's actually in it, before you know if it's buggy. Make companies accountable.
be aware of what's happening and spread awareness to other people. If you know someone who is maybe spending or plays microtransaction games, maybe like let them know like, hey, by the way, like this is what's going on. They're purposely trying to like get you addicted to this. It's kind of the same thing of like you kind of have to we have to watch out for one another and bring awareness to the whole issue so it's not just such a surprise when all of a sudden it's like what they've been you know getting us addicted to this for how long and they saying that it was fine the whole time. It's like we need to start thinking and start acting kind of now.
Yeah, 100% with you. Scary, scary stuff.
Very scary.
I think like I know it's not going to happen, but I think like for me personally, when there's a FromSoft game that has microtransactions in it. That's going to be the like. It's like I will lose so much hope when that day comes. I will be so
That
so
is
sad.
a big warning bell.
I
That
think
that
that's
day,
past the warning bell. I think if that day shows up, then it's like it's there's nothing anyone can do because I know like I'm not saying like if they were to make a lot of money from it, I'm just saying that like the point that like that company sells out is just like it's the same thing of like if a CD Project Red game has microtransactions in it, then it's like, gosh, uh oh, what is left at this point, right? Like who like that means that we have gone past almost the redemption point of there. But that being
FromSoft going
said,
microtrans would culminate in being the worst day in video gaming history. And that would be crowning the current worst day in video gaming history, which was the buyout of Enix over Squaresoft. Or buyout of
Yeah.
Squaresoft by Enix.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the
that
current
would be
saddest day in video
terrible.
game history.
that being said, I do want to at least kind of bring up on an upper note of kind of a silver lining to this whole thing. One really nice thing that's been happening because of all this kind of really terrible AAA games is that the indie industry is starting to flourish and flower, and there's a lot of awesome stuff that's being done in the indie industry nowadays that has nothing to do with any microtransactions. There's such small teams that don't have to worry about it too much. And if the AAA industry becomes this kind of complete shit show garbage mess, I'm pretty sure the A to AA industries will be kind of the phoenix that rises out of this, and I think we might see a bit of rebirth from it. That's my that's the hope I have still inside of me that even if things completely go to hell, I still think that games have gotten to the point where they're easy enough to make that small individual teams can make them without having to sell out to this microtransaction model and still be able to survive and eat and drink water and have
Yeah.
a shelter sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. The indie market has been picking up a ton of slack. And you can see in our list, there's a lot of companies there that were independently funded or independently developed, independently published, and they are truly, truly wonderful.
Yeah, I think Supergiant Games is like 20 people,
Yep,
Yeah.
they're an indie.
and Obsidian is a handful of people as well.
They're
And CD
not.
Projekt isn't small, but they're
Yeah, they're small, but I don't know if I'd call them indie just because of their background. They're Interplay Black Isle, in my mind.
Yeah, but at the same time, technically CD Project Red is indie, and they're like 500 people.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But that's neither here nor there.
Just amongst our panel, I love that everybody else is throwing out their favorite indie games. Maybe the panel will take them into consideration, but as an ending to avoid all these big AAAs that are doing bad things, on the bright side, some really good indie stuff is coming out. What's everyone's favorite indie game? Mine's Factorio, hands down.
Transistor's got to be up there. Slay the Spire is fantastic. Had a ton of fun with that game.
Pseudo?
that is way too tough of a question for me as I play so many indie games all the time.
What have you been
talk
playing
forever.
recently? The last 2 or 3 that you really liked?
Fury, The Messenger, Hollow Knight, Hyper Light
Yeah.
Drifter.
Well, like I love Death Road to Canada. I love all those smaller games like that. Lakeview Cabin, it's made by a single guy. If you guys have not played Lakeview Cabin, please play that game.
Ooh, I
just
haven't
released
played that yet. I've been meaning
Lakeview
to.
Valley. It is such a unique and awesome game. I bought it on a whim, and then my friend and I we stayed up all night playing it because it is fantastic. It is it's a 2D puzzle game that's horror movie themed, and you basically navigate horror movies to solve puzzles to beat levels, and it is fantastic. Stardew Valley is also fantastic.
Yeah,
Stardew Valley
is
was grand.
amazing.
Absolutely loved that game. Pookie and I got hooked on it and just played the shit out of it together. Just did everything. Actually, we got my mother into video games with that game. She loves
Yeah,
gardening. When
It's
Nicole
not
got
the
her
game
started
for
on it.
me. It's not the game for me, but it is a wonderful video game. Anybody who is interested in farming or management or games with cute little stories and cute pictures and animals that you can take care of should play Stardew Valley. That is an amazing game.
There's a great social system with the town too that's actually quite organic. Everybody has their own schedules. They're different places at different times on different days. They have their own likes and dislikes. You can befriend them by giving them things they like. You can freak them out by handing them gross things. It's
Just
well
give
done.
everybody frogs.
Some of them
Everybody
like it.
all of the time.
The
ones that like it, you want to be friends with them because frogs are dope.
The one sassy prissy girl, Pookie hated her, so she would always hand her like gross things. It was like negative hearts, basically. It took a long time to get her to like us after that. I think that's a decent list. I mean, there's a little bit of everything on that list, and those are all absolutely fantastic games. Some of them made by one person. Factorio is a single developer, which blows my mind because that game is amazing. Amazing. Hell Let Loose, 100-player World War II battles. Heard of it, Pseudo? Rage?
Never heard of it. Sounds potentially interesting, unless
Yeah.
it's trying to be realistic.
And I knew
in
it
which
had
case I won't like it.
It had a really rough launch, I believe. I remember it was mixed opinions for a while, but I think they've kind of gotten on top of things now, and it's become a lot better.
The graphics are pretty.
Well, I hate to interrupt our indie love-in that we've got going on right now, and these studios absolutely do deserve all of the love, but I do actually have to run at stream end time tonight.
That's fine. And we are at stream end time. I think we have done a decent job of framing what the issues are. Hopefully everybody learned something, a little bit.
If nothing else, they've learned that we will wax poetic about From Software's games for hours, if given the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to lose Rage's image for just a second here, because I got to check something in the Discord. We've been talking about a few different topics for next week. One of the ones we've been kicking around is game, and actually it's very interesting that Langston brought it up today as well, with game difficulty and game tuning, and how harder doesn't always necessarily mean better, unless it's a FromSoft game.
That's a brave statement, but it's something that I feel like we can back up.
So I think next week we'll be talking about difficulty tunings in games, why games can or can't be difficult. You know, what's the good of being difficult, what's the bad of being difficult. There's a lot of different things we can bring up there. Fuck you, Streamlabs.
Get wrecked. Yeah, it's a topic that I think is very interesting. It's a little bit more lighthearted than this week, so hopefully we'll be able to keep things a little happier, and we'll see you all then.
Thanks again for watching. This is Games by Design. As always, I'm Deus.
I am Rage.
And I am Pseudo.
Saying, may all your shots be headshots. Good evening.